Okay, guys, we're gonna get into it right now. Joe Rogan basically did a podcast with Brendan Schaub and basically broke it down like he doesn't want his homeboy to get hurt anymore. He doesn't want his friend to get knocked out. And basically was saying that Brendan Schaub is not an elite fighter. He's not in the top 10. He'll never be a champion. He kind of sucks. And my personal opinion is I think Brendan Schaub is not a top 10 heavyweight in the UFC. I would give him maybe a top 15. He could beat people in the top 15, but when it comes to the top 10, he doesn't look that great. I'm not saying everything Joe Rogan said was right, and I'm not saying everything he said was wrong. Joe Rogan is one of those dudes that has been around the game of mixed martial arts for years, more than a lot of these fighters have ever been competing. And even look at it this way. Dana White had the call out Chuck Liddell and say, dude, you're getting your ass knocked out a bunch of times. You need to quit. Look at a lot of fighters that have been fighting for years. Vanderlei Silva, a lot of these dudes have a little bit of stutter, a little bit of problems speaking. It's because back in the Pride days, they didn't care. They were just out there swinging for the fences, soccer kicking people in the head, and kicking people in the head with like a soccer kick. Like in Pride, if you guys don't know, you were able to literally have a guy laying on his back or on his front, and you could literally just go and stomp his head, and it was an okay move. To me, that is too brutal for the mixed martial arts. I really don't think martial arts was, or at least the sport aspect of mixed martial arts was all about that, because I never really was into watching somebody get kicked in the head, because you're like, God dang, that is brutal, which it really is. But for what Joe Rogan was saying, he had a point that he doesn't want to see his boy get knocked out like Rich Franklin. Rich Franklin's last fight was against Kong Lee, if I'm not mistaken, and he got brutally knocked out. But Brendan Schaub did say he did cry when he got home after the interview or the podcast, whatever. He cried because you never want to take constructive criticism. I don't care if you're a musician, you're a singer, you're an actor. No one wants to basically hear you're a wash-up, you suck. And that's kind of what Joe Rogan got from his point, was saying Joe Rogan wasn't trying to say he sucked, but it comes across to a lot of people that Joe Rogan was being a dick, saying, dude, you suck, you shouldn't be fighting, you can only fight on the undercard, you should go to Bellator, you should go to one of these other organizations and fight, because that's the only way you're going to make money. And Brendan Schaub basically says the money he makes on his podcast is the same amount of money he makes fighting, so I'm guessing he makes about $30,000 per fight. Do a lot of these dudes do it just for the money? Yeah, a lot of these people do it because they need money and there's no really other avenue for them. But you gotta take it like this. I get told all the time on my music channel here on YouTube that I'm not a great bass player, and I do look at that and I want to improve my skills, because I'm taking it as a constructive criticism. Some people are just being dicks. That's just the honest truth. Some people are just being like, oh, dude, you suck. Or, dude, your podcasts are weird. You don't know shit about MMA. But I do take that into consideration and do take that to heart. And sometimes it makes me feel like, why the fuck am I still doing this podcast if no one cares? Or if I'm doing this YouTube, why do I do it if no one really gives a damn? I do it because I love doing it. And I see why Brendan Schaub was saying, basically, he loves to fight, he loves to compete, he loves to train his ass off. There's a big difference from people loving to compete and people just loving to train. I'm one of those dudes, if I could do mixed martial arts, I would do it as a workout, basically learning the aspect of the transition from the punching to the kickboxing to the wrestling. I would love that aspect of it. I would never want to get into the cage. I don't think I have the balls to get in the cage and actually fight. Personally, I really don't think I have that ability to get in there and take damage. I'm a 5'4", 135-pound guy. I'll be fighting like Demetrius Johnson type people. Those dudes. And you got to look at it. There is a difference between Brendan Schaub and Cain Velasquez, okay? Because Joe Rogan actually asked me, said, in a straight wrestling match, do you think you can hang with Cain in a straight wrestling match? And he goes, yeah, you'd be surprised. I really don't think so. I think it'd be a night and day event. I think Kane would just whoop him on the ground. Look at it this way. When you see back in the day, just look at it this way. When Brock Lesnar first fought Frank Mir in the UFC, and Frank Mir got taken down, right? And Brock's just landing a lot of hammer fists. He does like a transition over Frank, and Frank was like, wow, that transition was real good. He transitioned from being on his stomach to his back really quickly, like I've never really seen a lot of people do. But he is a top level wrestler. Even though this dude's a top level grappler, he transitioned from the back or to the front to the back real easy and still was raining those punches. And you got to look at a lot of elite fighters, like he says in the interview too. You look at people such as GSP. Look what GSP was capable of doing as a fighter. He could stand there and throw a ton of punches and shoot in for a double leg takedown like nobody. A lot of these fighters are like more robotic. Look at a fighter such as Diego Sanchez, for example. That dude has taken a lot of punishment. You gotta go in. It doesn't matter if you're an elite level fighter like Conor McGregor or John Jones. Eventually, time will catch up to you, or there will be a guy that comes in there and just whoops your ass. It just happens. All major big level fighters come to an end by getting their ass whooped. It's gonna happen someday to Manny Pacquiao, to Floyd Money Mayweather. It will happen eventually unless these dudes retire before this happens. Like I said, Joe Rogan really went in there, I think, a little too hard. Even though it is his boy, he did go a little too aggressive with it. Like, it's like tough love, kind of like, dude, I don't want to tell you this, but you suck. And Brendan Schaub saying he took some of this to heart, but he took a lot of it like, man, you don't know me. I'm going to still compete. Because you got to look at it as an outsider. An outsider is always going to be able to tell you straight up, you suck, and this is why. But as an athlete or a musician, you're going to look at it and go, you're not in the cage. You're not playing the bass. You're not writing my songs. You suck. Because that's just the way it is. I really think he has a point to be respectful for his boy, to say, yes, you should quit. This is why. You don't want to end up being a retard later in life. But I think some of the stuff he did say, even though it was real harsh, might have been better to be left where there was no cameras and no podcasting going on there, because I wouldn't want my like dream, if I was a martial artist, be ripped down because somebody's being honest. This is why you suck. You haven't improved. Your punches look garbage. You look robotic in there. You're not just punch, takedown, transition. Because Brendan Schaub is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. But if you put him in a grappling tournament right now with either Nogueira, even like Nate or Nick Diaz. Let's say Nick Diaz, which is a 180-pound dude, versus Brendan Schaub. Brendan Schaub, I think, would get smoked. I really think Brendan Schaub would get smoked just because he's not an elite level grappler. I think he, like I said in the beginning of this podcast, I think he is an elite fighter at about 15 or 16 ranked. I don't really consider him in the top 10. You see a fighter like him versus Mitrione. Mitrione looks like a night and day difference compared to Brendan Schaub. And Brendan Schaub, I never really liked him that much. He says in this interview that Brendan Schaub's like, well, I knocked out Crow Cop. Well, I don't know if he would have knocked out Crow Cop when Crow Cop was competing in Pride. I really don't. When he was on the top, I don't think he would have been able to beat him. I think he could beat people like maybe somebody in the top 15, which I don't even know any top 15 heavyweights. But with that being said, let me know what you guys think of this whole situation. Do you think Joe Rogan went in too deep. Joe Rogan was being too much of a dickhead. And Joe Rogan was just speaking his mind because he has a mic in front of him. And he thinks he could talk about anything and everything. And people are going to agree with him. It's the same thing, guys. Like I said, when Dana White had to tell Chuck Liddell, dude, enough. And Chuck Liddell, even though he got knocked out, but Rich Franklin was like, it's not enough, dude. I'm still going to compete. And Dana White was like, dude, you ain't going to be competing in my organization. I'm going to have to tell you no. That's why I think there's always a time when you have to pack up. I don't care what sport it is, what you do in life. Look at it this way. Even Metallica, one time or another, is going to have to pack the bags because they're going to get just too old. You're not going to be fighting up into your 50s. Randy Couture went out by getting knocked out. Randy Couture was one of those dudes at about 44, 45, was whooping ass. But what happened, he got kicked in the face and knocked out. And he said, dude, it's enough. There's a time when you do have to pack the bags. But I don't think Brendan Schaub's at that point in his career. What did he do? Lose 2 fights in a row by getting knocked out? And even Brendan Schaub said he was on the ground talking to Yamasaki saying, dude, I'm okay. I'm ready to fight. I'm ready to go into the next round. But there's a point of just taking too many shots. And you don't want to get punch retarded. That's just my opinion. I really think Joe Rogan had a point, but I think he went in a little too harsh. And I really think Brendan Schaub is a decent fighter. Could he whoop my ass in a fight? Yeah, he could. Could he beat me on the ground with jiu-jitsu? Yeah, he could. Not saying just because he's a bigger dude. It's because his skill set is better than mine. But I'll definitely talk to you guys next time. Just let me know what you guys really think. Do you think Joe Rogan was being too harsh? Do you think it's sometimes you have to be brutally honest to get through someone's head? But you don't want to go so hard where you're making them cry. Because even Brendan Schaub said he actually cried at his house for about 20 minutes. And in the links below is the podcast. Or I'll just put it above my head. One is Joe Rogan's podcast. And then the other one's Brendan Schaub's rebuttal. So let me know what you guys think. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.